Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining. We're waiting to let a few more folks join in. And just as a reminder, everybody, if you can mute yourself if you are not speaking, it would be greatly appreciated, and we'll be starting in a few minutes.
Oh, God.
Hello again, everybody. Thank you for joining. We will start in just a couple of minutes, waiting for a few more folks to join on. And again, as a reminder, please mute yourself if you are not speaking. We'll go over housekeeping rules shortly. All right, everybody, I think we can go ahead and start. My name is Chris Chavez. I am the Deputy Policy Director at Coalition for Clean Air. And thank you for joining our webinar today on ensuring that all Californians have access to clean transportation. As we know, clean transportation is a significant issue in California. California has positioned itself as a global climate leader, and a big part of that effort is turning over and transitioning the electric vehicle fleet from internal combustion engines to zero-emission vehicles. Before we begin, just want to go over a few housekeeping rules. First, we recommend that you use the speaker view, which should be the view options on the top right of your screen. Please mute unless speaking. We do have a staff member that is monitoring the meeting, and anybody who is being disruptive, either unintentionally or unintentionally, will be muted or removed. Unlike in-person events, again, we will freely mute you. Please feel free to use the chat and ask questions in the chat. Also, please feel free to say hi to friends. This has proven actually to be a very popular webinar. We are already at 80 participants, which is fantastic, and we really appreciate the interest in the webinar. We will be recording this event, but certainly we encourage folks to use discretion in what they say and to also have a respectful tone towards each other. So getting into the crux of the matter, again, California is a global climate leader. A big part of California's focus is transitioning to zero-emission vehicles, both in the passenger light-duty space as well as the medium and heavy-duty space. And as we've seen, a significant amount of funding has gone towards transitioning those vehicles through rebates, through incentives, through different programs. Many people know, when we're talking about passenger vehicles, about the Clean Vehicle Rebate Project, or CVRP. But today, we're here discussing California's equity-focused program, the Clean Cars for All program, formerly known as the Enhanced Fleet Modernization Plus Up, or EFMP Plus Up. Fortunately, they have switched the acronym to Clean Cars for All, which is a little bit easier to understand. Clean Cars for All offers up to $9,500 in incentive funds to income qualified folks, depending on the type of vehicles they are purchasing. Additionally, the program is intended to focus on California's disadvantaged communities, which are among the most polluted and most impacted from different different impacts throughout the state. The difference in the Clean Cars for All program is that it's unique in how it's run. Unlike CVRP, which is primarily ran through the CARB, California Air Resources Board, as well as the Center for Sustainable Energy, the Clean Cars for All program is ran on a day-to-day basis, mostly by the air districts. And there are 5 air districts that are currently participating or will be participating. Those include the South Coast Air Quality Management District, San Joaquin Air Pollution Control District, Bay Area Air Quality Management District, Sacramento Metropolitan Area Air Quality Management District, and soon the San Diego Air Pollution Control District. Each of these programs have different ways in how they are implementing the program, and each program has taken a different approach in terms of outreach to the communities they are intended to serve. Some of these programs have been wildly successful, while others could potentially show improvement in how they reach and serve disadvantaged and low-income communities. The UCLA Luskin Center for Innovation has done a study on the programs, comparing how the different air districts have implemented them and looking at best practices and recommendations for improving the overall programs. Today, we'll be hearing from Gregory Pierce, the now co-director, or soon-to-be co-director of the Luskin Center for Innovation at UCLA, which conducted the study, as well as Amelia Reyes from the Fresno Economic Opportunities Commission in the San Joaquin Valley. At this time, I will turn it over to Gregory Pierce to present his findings on the report. Gregory?
Thanks, Chris, and thanks to everyone for joining today. I'm going to attempt to share my screen, and you all should now be seeing my screen in this presentation that I'm going to briefly give around, as Chris mentioned, the most recent report that we at the Luskin Center for Innovation came out with, focused on procedural equity in California's Clean Cars for All program, but put that in the broader context of, as Chris was talking about, our mandate and our ambition in California to transition to 100% electrification of transportation, as well as to make that equitable, and also emphasize some of the research we and more broadly has been done around the economic importance of vehicle access for low-income households and how that intersects with some of the programs and policies here. I do want to say up front that this work was not just done by myself, but this research and much of the research we do in this space was co-authored with Rachel Connolly, who is on the call today, as well as Isabella Blanco. So I want to give them credit up front. Moving forward, though, I do want to emphasize again that this recent report is part of a much larger stream of research that we do at UCLA, engage with state agencies, including CARB, certainly, as well as local, regional agencies, nonprofits, and community-based organizations around the transition to zero-emission transportation in California. And particularly, we take an emphasis on or try to prioritize research that supports an equitable transition, a just transition toward 100% electrification in transportation. And I also want to emphasize something that I think has been underemphasized in some of the discussions and some of the policy and program development in California around clean transportation, which is that transportation is a huge component of household economic mobility. And we found consistently, and when I say we, I don't just mean myself and colleagues at UCLA, but a much broader network of researchers, particularly how much car access is valued by low-income households, what it does for educational and employment sort of outcomes, as well as how much low-income households value car access in terms of time savings, in terms of other opportunities that they may need to access. And I think the emphasis that low-income households place on car access needs to be put in the broader context of an effort not only to make transportation clean, but also to make it truly affordable for all households in California. And as I'll say at the end and throughout this presentation, I think we can do more in our efforts toward clean transportation and clean transportation equity to make that a reality. But again, my presentation in our recent report really focuses in on the Clean Cars for All program. And the Clean Cars for All program is really unique and special in that it's a program, as Chris already detailed, that offers quite a large benefit for particularly low-income households to retire an existing gross polluting vehicle that they have and to trade that in and be able to purchase a clean vehicle, anywhere from a hybrid to 100% or to a battery electric vehicle. The program is also unique because it's been running for quite some time. It's no longer a pilot. It's quite a mature program in the context of clean transportation equity programs nationwide. It's been running since 2015. And accordingly, it's been operating and been able to allocate over $90 million of benefits to participants in California, placed over 11,000 vehicles with low-income households. And then soon we'll be operating in 5 metropolitan areas across the state. So it's currently undergoing an expansion. And much of the research we've done in the past has focused on the pilot stages of the program and sort of adaptation of program operations and eligibility requirements. But we wanted to take this most recent report and research and focus on how the programs and different districts within the program, as Chris mentioned, are conducting outreach for the program, given that fairly large benefits are offered through the program, and there's high demand for the program. Not every low-income household, not nearly every low-income household who's eligible for the program can access it automatically. So it is a sort of first come, first served type program where not every household who is interested in the program can access it necessarily with current levels of funding. So again, there's much more detail in our report. I won't go into too much the data and research methodology, but to carry out the study, we really focused on 3 air quality management districts in the state, 2 of which, the South Coast, which serves essentially 20 or covers most of the Southern California region north of San Diego, covers about 20 million people, as well as the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District, which covers the San Joaquin Valley, around 4 million people. They've been operating this Clean Cars for All program since 2015. And then the Bay Area Air Quality Management District has been operating program for 2 or 3 years. So we were really focusing in on those 3 districts. And in order to undertake our research, we conducted interviews directly with each of the districts, as well as contractors who work with each of the districts in doing program outreach and community-based organizations. We also analyzed 6 years of participant level data to present a snapshot of sort of the distributive equity outcomes under the program, essentially where incentives were going and how much incentive dollars were going to disadvantaged communities, and different types of sort of disadvantaged household definitions. But the core of our research, again, was focusing on the aspect of procedural equity and how the program itself operated through the 3 districts and their partners achieved 3 aspects of procedural equity. And I'll jump straight into the results. Again, we have a lot more detail in the report, but essentially we focused in on 3 different aspects of procedural equity. The first was around participation and inclusiveness. And this really looked at the extent, the type, and the number of collaborations that each district involved in its outreach process for the program to make people aware of and support them, to make eligible households aware of and support them to apply for the program. And here we found, I would say, the largest amount of variation across the 3 districts, where we had on one end of the spectrum, one of the districts in the San Joaquin Valley, or the San Joaquin Valley district, emphasizing and sort of experimenting with every possible type of outreach and undertaking in-person events, social media, phone, email, sort of everything that was available. To on the other end of the spectrum in South Coast, there at some points needing to be an actual moratoria on outreach, or the district undertaking sort of a cessation of outreach due to the large waiting list it had for the program. Secondly, in terms of capacity building, we also saw quite a range actually across the 3 districts in terms of the involvement of community-based organizations to conduct outreach, as well as the pairing of the Clean Cars for All program alongside other benefit programs to sort of maximize the impact or benefit to low-income households when signing up for one program. So again, here we saw sort of differing partnership models where in the San Joaquin Valley, we saw sort of a wide variety of partnerships and rotation of partnerships in different regions of the valley. In the Bay Area, sort of a mixed model partnership with Grid Alternatives as the contractor for the program and offering of other sorts of energy incentives alongside the Clean Cars for All incentive, as Grid Alternatives has experience in. And then on the South Coast end, mostly a focus strictly on the Clean Cars for All benefit, with the exception of one pilot within the district, the Empower pilot, that really operated to offer the widest variety of benefits from environmental incentive programs that anyone has done to date, I would say, in the state. Last but not least, in terms of respect and recognition, I would say we saw the most commonality across the 3 districts. And I do want to emphasize in our conversations with really everyone involved in the program, including participants, we found that pretty universal approval and, well, people like the program, I'll say simply. And we also found that really each district, again, in different ways and to varying degrees, but each district really did make attempts to adapt its program to meet the needs of low-income participants, to respond to feedback. And we particularly saw quite an impressive amount of adaptation and innovation in how the program was operated during the COVID pandemic, compared to lots of other sort of social benefit, environmental benefit programs that we've analyzed. Moving on briefly to look at a little bit different perspective on equity, distributive equity. We also, as I said, analyzed data that was provided to us by the California Air Resources Board on total incentive allocation through the program over the first 6 years of its operation. And there's a lot of different numbers, actually more numbers in the report. But I think the key things to emphasize here are that you do see pretty wide variation in terms of the total number of incentives across each air district, as well as the percentage of tracks in each region that are disadvantaged communities. But what I want to particularly note here is that you do see sort of outsized percentages of incentive dollars to disadvantaged communities, incentive dollars going to sort of the most impacted, or the top 10% disadvantaged communities in each district, as well as much less disadvantaged communities that receive no incentive dollars in the San Joaquin Valley as compared to the other two air districts. And of course, another way to look at distributive equity is just to look at sort of dollars allocated. And here again, you see some variation across the three districts. Whereas at the outset of the program in 2015, as a pilot, South Coast and San Joaquin air districts both received, I believe, identical allocations of funding. Over time, the South Coast received and distributed a higher volume of funding overall, and the Bay Area caught up with the San Joaquin Valley in terms of funding allocation fairly quickly. On the other hand, if you just focus on the blue bars, the funding allocated to disadvantaged communities, you see that despite much sort of overall funding allocated through San Joaquin Valley to low-income households, the percentage or the total amount of dollars allocated or benefiting disadvantaged communities in San Joaquin Valley is still quite comparable to South Coast and much larger than in the Bay Area in its initial few years of operation. Last but not least, we have some recommendations based on our research here and in previous reports for further action to make the program better and broader in the future at the state level. The first recommendation we have based on the interviews we did in analyzing the data was that the state would do well to provide more certainty around the timing and extent of funding available to districts, particularly in order to reduce or eliminate waiting lists that place a high burden and a high level of uncertainty on low-income households and their budgeting decisions. The second would be that the program could be better adapted to ensure essentially that those low-income households who are most in need of the program are able to overcome any paperwork and logistical burdens to access it, and also to weed out potential households which may technically meet eligibility requirements if they file certain paperwork but aren't the intended targets of the program. And then last but not least, we think that the types of additional equity metrics that we analyze in the program over and above the core or basic equity guidelines or eligibility requirements that are installed or instituted by CARB could be supplemented, that additional evidence-based targets could really further advance both distributive and procedural equity beyond those that are currently used to evaluate the program formally. Last but not least, I do want to acknowledge in this research, again, my co-authors, but also that funding for this research was provided to us by Electrify America via the Liberty Hill Foundation. And we also want to acknowledge the input and really partnership in this work with the Coalition for Clean Air. With that, I will turn the floor back over to Chris and to Amelia.
Great, thank you very much, Greg. And before we jump to Amelia, who will be sharing her perspectives in terms of on-the-ground community outreach and also present, including a brief video in her presentation, I do want to point out on the funding stability for the program, because it's timely, that the California budget does include $75 million for the Clean Cars for All program, which is the most the program has received over the lifetime of the program. However, it is important to note, and the reason why it has $75 million is in large part due to the advocacy of Coalition for Clean Air and our partners in the California Charge Ahead Coalition. We also note that it is actually significantly less than some of the other incentive programs such as CVRP, which got significantly more money, both in terms of this year and in future years. So it is important to note that there are policy decisions being made, fiduciary decisions being made, which do impact the program. And fortunately, while that funding is higher than it has been historically, the state can do more to prioritize equity programs. So with that, thank you very much again, Greg, for your presentation. I'd like to introduce the CEO of the Fresno Economic Opportunities Commission, Amelia Reyes, who can speak on their work in the San Joaquin Valley and in the Fresno area. Amelia?
First, I want to thank the Coalition for Clean Air and UCLA Electrify America for inviting us to this conversation to get the community perspective. Like Chris said, my name's Amelia Reyes. I have the pleasure, and I say this with all my heart, the pleasure of serving as a CEO of Fresno Economic Opportunities Commission. We are the largest community action agency in California and one of the largest in the nation. For over 55 years, Fresno EOC has been dedicated to lifting our most vulnerable population out of poverty. Now, how do we do this? We operate over 35 different programs to address root causes of intergenerational poverty with a whole family approach. And everywhere possible, we also try to leverage our strong partnerships so we can make the biggest impact in our community. All of our programs operate throughout Fresno County, and many of our programs are located in downtown Southwest Fresno area. Unfortunately, Southwest Fresno is home of the most polluted zip code in the state. In a study of over 1,700 zip codes, Cal EPA looked at everything from pesticides to traffic density, groundwater threats, and 93706 took first place in having the worst air quality. A recent Health Policy Institute study titled Place Matters for Health reports that the life expectancy of people living in the 93706 area code is only 69 years of age. 69. And while our neighborhood zip code 7 miles north of us has a life expectancy of 90. That's almost 20-year difference. That is just dumbfounding. Along with the heavy pollutants in the zip code is the most underserved and disadvantaged community in our county. This area is also stricken with poverty. Median household income is just a little bit over $32,000. And there are so many disparities between residents in this zip code and neighboring areas, from lack of access to healthcare, lower educational levels, as well as life expectancy rates. There are several initiatives Fresno EOC is involved with to help provide services and outreach to this underserved community. And we are in the community. Actually, I just gave a 3-hour tour to a couple of our elected officials here locally so they can hear. I'm sorry. My nephew just learned how to FaceTime, and he's like 3 years old, and he's FaceTiming his auntie right now. So please forgive me for the interruption. Oh my goodness. I don't know how to turn this off here. Let me see. Okay, sorry. And so we're actually in the community. I gave a tour literally this morning from 9 to 12. So some of our oh my goodness, he's not giving up on me. Let me see if I can turn it off. I shouldn't have given my cell phone number. There are several initiatives that we're in the community. We have our African American Coalition, which has provided COVID-19 testing and vaccinations throughout the entire pandemic. We also have energy assistance, paid job skills training, gun violence reduction, gang intervention, family strengthening, leadership training, food distribution, and our Head Start 0 to 5 early care and education. And just most recently, we are a support for the Dawn Project, which is $1 million that was set aside for the Darling plant, which was polluting that neighborhood, go to a nonprofit called Dawn, a community-based initiative, which has goals to reduce infant mortality, preterm birth rates, environmental risk factors in West Fresno, and through workforce development, infrastructure improvements, and the creation of a women's health clinic, which is very essential in this area. I want to mention another underserved rural area of our county. One of our board members, Commissioner Ray Leon, who's also the mayor of Huron, a small rural farm working community, is an agent for change. He is involved in the Veloz Electric for All campaign, and this campaign advocates for social, economic, environmental justice, and educates communities on the importance of going electric. Ray established Green Rancheros, an electric vehicle ride-sharing service launched by Latino Equity Advocacy and Policy Institute, LEAP, a nonprofit founded by him. This nonprofit has been able to create jobs, provide safe, free transportation, and help clean the severe air pollution problem in the valley. You would be surprised to know Huron has the most EV chargers per capita than any other city in the country. However, they need more powerful EV chargers. He made sure to let me know that. It's easy to see the intersectionality within the community and similar communities and see the struggle of social, economic, and environmental justice. With all of the current clean air initiatives and funding being allocated, now is a time to focus on more of our disadvantaged communities. According to the California Environment Screen, 93706 ranks in the 98th percentile for asthma. One of those individuals that struggle with it. Cardiovascular rates are ranking 99th percentile for low birth weight babies. We have one of the highest preterm birth rates in the country. And air quality ozone, the ranking is 98th percentile, and this area is in the 95th percentile for diesel matters, making transportation one of the larger contributors of pollution in this area. Communities like ours are already underserved and disadvantaged, and as I've mentioned, breathing should not be listed as a bonus when you're looking at a community to relocate to. In Fresno County, our agency is moving forward in clear air initiatives and providing electrical vehicles and charging stations. In 93706, currently we have 6 charging stations installed, not enough. 10 more are underway for installation, and we just received notification that we will be receiving an additional 10. I want to share a brief video which covers more of our efforts in Southwest Fresno and our efforts in cleaning up our air. Weatherizing home, installing solar, and providing cleaner air vehicles.
So the type of projects Energy Services is doing in the community involves home weatherization, where we go in and install energy efficient measures, provide energy education to the client, as well as providing, in some cases, owner-occupied homes with solar panels that are installed free of charge and will be owned by those household members. Within this last year, we've been able to serve 10,000 or more customers through utility assistance, over 100 customers with emergency cooling supplies and needs. Through our local conservation corps, we've been able to train members in weatherization services.
Fresno ELC provided for my home weather stripping, windows, porch lights all the way around, and new solar panels. PG&E bills were kind of high without the solar panels. They were running around about $250, $280, somewhere around in there, give or take a little. And right now, we have a zero balance on our PG&E bill. With the old windows, we had to constantly run our heater. We were having to put blankets over the windows to keep the cold out. They come in and install fire alarms in every room, every bedroom. They put the carbon monoxide monitor in the hallway. With that, we're very pleased that we feel very safe now.
So under Transform Fresno's project, Fresno EOC is partnering with Valley Clean Air Now, or Valley Can, and the main objective is to spread the word on the program and the offerings available in order to provide clean vehicles to the community at large.
Valley Can, with a partnership with Valley Air District, administrative the different programs. One of them is the replacement and retirement and replacement vehicle program. If you have a car 1999 or older and your car didn't pass emissions test, you can qualify for an incentive. It depends on your income and the size of your family. You can qualify for $5,500, $7,500, or $9,500. This is to use as a down payment in the purchase of a new or used car. This car needs to be a hybrid car. Valley Can helps more than 3,500 people with this program. I'm very happy to work in this program because when I see the people receiving their cars, they are very happy, and it changed their lives. And when they receive the car, they really feel very happy. And when I told them, well, you're receiving a new car that will help you economically and everything, but you also are helping for the environment, and they really feel good.
So as you can see, it's very important to me as well that we're doing what we are able to with the help of our strong partnerships. We can't do this alone in order to make a difference in the Valley and change our residents' lives. We will continue this effort in cleaning up our Valley air with our Transform Fresno project, energy services programs, transit programs, and all our other programs providing outreach and services. We have the ability and the expertise to do further electrification. Community-based agency organizations like Fresno EOC and their partners provide services in home, and we are trusted messengers in these communities. Service-based organizations like ours also have a need to electrify service vehicles. Fresno EOC, we are a good example, has over 100 vehicles in our transit system program, which provides services to lower income individuals and also that are housed in the 93706 area. Electrification will move forward as funding becomes available. Also, guarantee funding in these disadvantaged areas like West Fresno is needed to do overall to focus on these disparities and make it equitable. As you can see from the research and from our partners, the current funds are not enough to meet the needs of our residents, who are the most disadvantaged and are breathing the worst air in the state. The impact on one family who receives a clean air vehicle in these areas has tremendous potential. A clean air vehicle has a possibility of increasing the quality of life. They will have lower fueling costs, less mechanic bills, a more reliable vehicle, more money for basic needs to meet their family's needs, and as well as contributing to lower emissions in their own neighborhoods, making it easier to breathe. Thank you for allowing Fresno EOC to participate in this important discussion and sharing the story of our most vulnerable populations, the voices in our community, our residents in Southwest Fresno and the Central Valley, whose livelihoods are directly impacted by these efforts. Thank you, everyone.
And thank you very much, Amelia. I really appreciate your work in the San Joaquin Valley. And actually what you said about the difference in life really resonates with me personally. In the community I live in Western Long Beach, lifespan is about 8 years shorter than on the eastern side of the city. So that injustice, that impact, that disparate impact replicates itself throughout the state. So I really want to connect it to that work and really show that these folks that can benefit from this program, it's not just one thing they're facing. They're facing a multitude of issues, whether it's housing, whether it's access to economic opportunity, access to healthcare, access to the many things that folks take for granted. So certainly programs like Clean Cars for All, programs and the work like Fresno EOC does, or Liberty Hill Foundation does with the Empower program, and their partners is incredibly important. So at this time, we would like to open it up to questions and answers. Please feel free to type your questions in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and start off with a few seed questions, and hopefully that stirs up some conversation. So first question, maybe we can continue on with the conversation that we were just having. In your opinion, and this could go to either or both Greg or Amelia, why should policymakers prioritize equity? So we have legislative requirements. You have SB 1275, which created the Charge Ahead California initiative, which was the outgrowth of our work and our partners' work. You have SB 535 and AB 1550, which require a certain amount of funding from our climate investments program to go to disadvantaged low-income communities. But why is it important to really prioritize that equity nexus there?
I can give a few remarks and Amelia can jump in. I mean, there's so many reasons. I'll give you three. The first I do want to start with is, as I mentioned and Amelia mentioned, I mean, transportation is a core part of facilitating opportunity. And if we care, as we should, about all of our residents in California, we need to make transportation affordable, to facilitate health and prosperity for everyone. The other two reasons, though, I think are, even if you're cynical, are motivating in that if we don't prioritize clean, equitable, clean vehicle access, as I mentioned, households are going to need to find a way to get around. And the research shows over and over again that households are going to access old, gross polluting vehicles. So we need to reach our climate goals. So just for that fact alone, there is really no other alternative than to provide assistance to households to be able, who don't have the income to be able to access clean vehicles. And the other is related in that, not having access to clean vehicles and not having, having very poor air quality, as Amelia mentioned, in certain zip codes, especially, is harms people's health, and the burden for healthcare costs ultimately falls on the state in any case. It's better to have preventative care, everyone knows, than to be reactive. And I would consider clean transportation access to be a form of preventative care that we should be taking, just, even if you only care about the economics of the situation. So I'll stop there.
Go ahead, Amelia.
No, thank you, Greg. You nailed it, because equity is at the forefront of the work. Equity should be at the forefront of when we're making these policy decisions regarding our community. When we have our families struggling just to meet the basic needs, to keep the lights on, to feed their children, to have transportation, we know our families are struggling, and poverty is actually the main contributor of all this work. And if we can allow for having actually clean air in our community for our families to be able to thrive, that is not okay. We need to have our policymakers really put equity at the forefront, because we are only as strong as our most vulnerable population.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. I'm going to jump to one of our audience questions, and then I'll jump to another one of mine. So our first audience question is there an opportunity for collaboration between government funding and private investment that can enhance the size and outreach of the programs? Anybody wants
Is this referring specifically to the Clean Cars for All program, or sort of across?
I think we can keep it focused on Clean Cars for All, but if you see another opportunity that should be raised, certainly, I mean, feel free to put that in there.
Well, Amelia unmuted herself, so I'll let her respond first.
Well, I had internet connection, so I didn't get that last part. But when you're talking about government funding and investment funding, we're, as a community agency, we're always trying to maximize our federal and state dollars and not duplicate efforts, but also just complement. So when we're trying to advocate for philanthropy or other private investments to really invest in our community, we first need to maximize what we currently have, and then also add on to the investment to help us do more in the community, because the need is so great, and we do not have enough funding, and just in the clean air for all efforts, let alone the need for our community overall.
Great, thank you. Let me jump to one over here. So why is it important that disadvantaged and low-income communities need more intensive case management and outreach? And speaking from personal experience, I had a cousin who needed a new vehicle after a car accident. And when I posted the Replace Your Ride website on her Facebook page, just asking for recommendations, she thought it was actually, she wasn't sure of its how legitimate the program was. And I think it goes to show that there's not a lot of public knowledge, or the public knowledge of the program can be improved. But why do you think that there is a level of of distrust or a level of skepticism when it comes to this money that's being put out there by the state.
Going back to why we need community-based agencies and being trusted messengers, and the question, why do they need more case management? Well, while our families are struggling to meet the basic needs, having additional paperwork to make sure that they do the clean air, or I don't even want to go into filling out Medi-Cal forms or enrolling your child. These families are struggling on just meeting basic needs, let alone you want to add additional paperwork so they can get an incentive to help their families and to get further ahead. I'm not sure if I'm able to answer it, but the families in our community have been struggling enough, and we need to make it as easy as possible for them to access services that they should be available to all. And so unfortunately, they don't trust government because of things of the past and the history. However, government has been working really hard. I know here locally in Fresno, working with our community-based agencies so we can make sure that we're maximizing the resources that we do have available for our community. And so our role is to make sure that community does trust government, be that conduit between the government and the community to make sure that they get the services they need for their families.
Great, thank you, Emilia. We have another question on the issue of low-income qualified versus disadvantaged communities. So in the Bay Area, the Clean Cars for All program looks at low-income qualified versus disadvantaged communities, and how the person framed is, will this loophole be corrected in the next cycle of funding? I may be able to speak a little bit on that, but certainly some of the presenters may have some thoughts as well. So I do know that the state does put together a funding plan for clean transportation programs after the state budget that will help put together the guidelines for the program. I think if there is a concern about how the program is administered, really the appropriate venues to really push for those changes are through that funding plan, as well as by reaching out or really highlighting the issue with the members of the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. But certainly I think that is an important distinction as far as making sure that folks are being properly served. Either Emilia or Greg, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, without getting too much into the weeds around these definitions, I would say, and I guess I should say, I'm not quite sure what you're referring to with respect to the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, potentially, specifically in this case, but I would say our research shows, and past research has showed, other programs, including CVRP, initially almost all of the benefits were going to quite high-income Californians. That's part of the motivation for Clean Cars for All, as well as new income, household income sort of tiers to CVRP. But in general, our research shows that, and I would advocate for prioritizing both household income and living in a disadvantaged community as criteria, given we have so many low-income households living in disadvantaged communities. Applying both criteria still leaves you with an enormous population to target, and that's where the dollars can be best spent. And I think the data and some of the metrics we put in our report back that up.
Great, thank you very much. So this is always a fun question. Is there funding to help cities install more charging stations for apartment residents? I might be able to take a stab at that as well, and I think Greg might have some thoughts too, and certainly Emilia, if you do as well, please jump in. So this is always going to be a perennial challenge for California's electrification goals, zero-emission transportation goals when it comes to zero-emissions transportation. So in terms of funding, there is right now an effort to reauthorize AB 8, which is was legislation that included a suite of programs for both public and different charging infrastructure. There was an effort to get that reauthorized this year, but that remains to be seen how that develops. If not, it will need to be reauthorized next year. There's been a big effort from the utilities to also do charging infrastructure both at single-family homes and also multi-unit apartments facilities. And as an apartment owner, or not apartment owner, apartment renter myself, this question is also particularly pertinent to me as well. So I certainly appreciate the question. So there is funding out there, but I think it is the biggest challenge that remains to be fully addressed in this effort. As far as the cities go, it really depends. I think really what a lot of the focus is on the city side of it is the time it takes to approve permits for charging infrastructure. And there is legislation out there, AB 790, if I remember correctly, that we have been involved with about the permitting process. However, it is a sticky issue and it is a tough issue. Either Greg or Emilia?
I can weigh in briefly. I mean, Chris covered a lot of what I would say, but I would say generally, yeah, there's a challenge in getting really a range of environmental incentives, solar, water efficiency, those benefits to apartment dwellers. And there's an inherent difficulty in getting the cooperation or partnership of landlords. So I'd say in this case in particular, I think cities are making particular efforts. There is some funding available. Chris covered that, but I'd also say that soon and now we should be moving also to an emphasis on workplace charging, on publicly available charging, and very soon we should have DC fast chargers and the next wave of technology that allow for gas station model, where there's just fast charging available in public places, sort of everywhere. And that's really the model we're looking to, I think, instead of trying to get EV chargers necessarily into every multifamily dwelling on site. That's my opinion. I know there's some controversy there, but I think that's probably the most holistic approach. And it's going to be feasible. If it's not feasible soon, it will be feasible pretty soon.
Great, thank you very much. I know that we also have a couple folks that want to ask questions verbally, and we can get to that shortly. I just want to work through some of the backlog. We're getting a lot of good questions from folks. So one question that I wanted to jump to as well, and this might be a little bit easier for to get to, is it does the for our panelists, is that some of the Clean Car for All districts, such as South Coast and San Joaquin, allow consumers to still purchase a combustion engine, albeit a cleaner one. Considering the governor's order to move away from conventional combustion engines by 2035, should those districts continue to offer those types of vehicles?
There is a both and, right? There's a transition period and families need to prioritize and be able to start transitioning into it. If they automatically, I'm going to say the electric bill, we want to talk about the rural communities automatically transferring over. I think about our families in Huron and Mendota, which at least are an hour and a half from Fresno. And we're talking about charging station and apartment complexes. Well, we need charging stations throughout our entire area because our geographical area is very large and very empty from one city to the town next over. So transitioning completely, yes, we want them to be completely transitioned into electric vehicles. However, there is a time that we need a transition period that they're able to do both at one point. Then we're able to be able to accommodate all electric vehicles throughout the entire county.
I would say similarly. I mean, I think the answer is yes, but maybe not yet. Again, as the range, of all EVs and like a broader suite of EVs, the range is sort of capable of meeting almost all normal travel needs, which will be true in a few years, and the cost will be, on par with gas. Again, estimates are in a few years. Then I think, yes, we should tighten the restrictions, but I think to do it now would be counterproductive for low-income households, and for the feasibility of households making that decision. So I think we have to be realistic, but also ambitious.
And I think maybe also to add a little bit of context is that we can look at a suite of very different approaches when it comes to combustion vehicles. So you have the purely combustion vehicles, which don't have plug-in hybrid capabilities, that aren't at least able to partially operate on electric vehicles. Certainly, I think from a policy perspective, Coalition for Clean Air would be in favor of getting rid of the pure combustion vehicles, but having those plug-in hybrids being prioritized. But certainly we want to make sure that this program is serving as many needs as possible. But again, the goal is ultimately to have 100% electrification. So if it is within the state's interest to begin pushing that envelope, working with those communities and preparing them for that transition now, and trying to do as much as you can to get, again, either to at absolute minimum, plug-in hybrid vehicles out there. I know we have a person from the San Joaquin Air Pollution Control District that has their hand raised as well. Jamie Holt, if you want to speak, go ahead.
Just real quickly, this is a great conversation, by the way. Thank you all so much. But I put it in the chat, and it looks like there's another note in the chat. There are many programs out there for electric vehicle charging infrastructures. And I know many of our community-based partners in Fresno have taken advantage of it. We actually just had a grand opening of one down in Southwest Fresno that the Housing Authority was involved in last week. So lots going on in that arena, and it's actually fairly significant funding in the San Joaquin Valley. Can be up to $50,000, and it does include up to level 3 chargers. Thanks for letting me share that.
Absolutely, and thank you for adding that additional information to our apartment discussion. Let's see, I'm trying to keep track of the different questions since there was a number that came up. One question also that came up as well is, does the state or the air districts consider the best clean transportation options overall, considering where or whether individual cars are needed rather than better and cleaner transit or car sharing? I do know that the program also does include mobility options, or a clean mobility option in lieu of a passenger vehicle. So that is something that is included as a possibility. Greg, did your research see anything in regards to the clean mobility options?
Yeah, I guess I'll say a good point, a good question, and I'm all for, where households can make the decision and don't want or prefer a car, supporting other mobility options is fantastic. I would say, again, consistently, our research has shown that low-income households tend to be very interested in vehicles, even in urban areas. It goes over and above just travel needs, or strict sort of travel needs, to flexibility and viewing cars as economic assets. So I'd say there's a lot of low-income households and households in general who are going to want a vehicle regardless of other clean mobility options, and to actually own that vehicle. Research is pretty strong there. That being said, again, the Clean Cars for All, as Chris mentioned, it does provide a transit alternative as well as an e-bike alternative in some districts, at least the Bay Area. I believe Sacramento is going to do the same, and I believe the other air districts are going to, continue to offer that or expand that offering. And with some of the new micromobility options, particularly in urban areas, I think those will become more and more attractive, and I'm all for supporting those alongside as a complement or as a substitute to vehicle access, where, again, low-income households desire it and it works for their mobility needs.
Great, thank you. I want to make sure that if anybody has a verbal question, they have an opportunity to ask that. So if anybody has a question, please raise your hand. We may have time for one last question. Anybody? Okay. Well, I guess I can end on a question of my own. There are some questions about the recording being public. Karen, do we typically make these recordings public?
We can put a link on our website, so it's going to take a couple of days.
Great. So yes, it should be available. So I guess, like I said, I'll end it on just one last question. So we've seen a difference between how the different districts have implemented the program, where you have one, it's some districts taking more of a mass market approach, or other districts taking more of a case management, on the ground community outreach approach. Do you think that there is some value in combining those two different approaches in trying to really get folks plugged into this program?
I'll just briefly say yes. And to be clear, I think it makes sense for there to be sort of uniform basic eligibility guidelines, as well as goals for the state, given its 100% electrification mandate, but also flexibility and more case management, and at a minimum combining sort of the housing, transportation, energy needs that are and supporting those across programs that are needed for house transition. So I think my answer again is yes, both.
Amelia, then I know we have one other question that popped up. Do you have anything?
No, I'm sorry, I missed the question. My internet connection, I'm trying to hear. so
No
sorry
worries.
about that.
For the sake of time, I think we'll go ahead and jump to this will be the final question from Justin Shayer.
Hi, Justin Sasher, KC24 CBS 47 here in 93706. Efforts to make incentives equitable do make good policy. You mentioned there are things like skepticism, which seems like a hurdle that's initially there, but then once you achieve getting past something like skepticism, you can move on to new things. Mentioned was charging equipment at workplaces. Do you have other options that are now on the table once you pass some of these initial hurdles?
So if I understand the question correctly, then, so you're basically asking that once you overcome that initial skepticism, are there other opportunities, other things that you can plug these communities into? Okay. I'll let Amelia or Greg jump into that, and then maybe I can add one last final context and we can wrap up the webinar.
So, Jamie from our San Joaquin Valley area suggested earlier, and actually is a great concept, is getting them into our housing authority sites. That's a good step as well, getting them out through the entire community, and actually making available at employees' workplaces. And then also to create similar, like, I think Greg mentioned this earlier in the presentation, like gas station kind of type feel that they're throughout the entire county. So they're able to make it more easier, user-friendly, because some of these might require apps. And so they might be a little confusing for them. So I think that recommendation was also a very good one as well.
Greg, do you have anything to add?
No, I think in the interest of time, I'll let you close it out.
Okay, and I think I'll do the
second part.
Go ahead.
I'm just curious how many, if you can give me a number or range of how many low emission vehicles went to these DACs.
Yes, I believe Greg has that information in the report.
Yeah, I don't have it off the top of my head. I mean, out of the 11,000 vehicles, I don't want to guess here. I can follow up with you if you email me and get you that number pretty quickly, though.
Great. And just Jamie, I know from San Joaquin Air Pollution Control District. Anything? Okay.
Nope, just trying to lower my hand. My apologies.
Gotcha. No worries. No worries. And I think just to add some final context to your question, Justin, is yes, there are some great opportunities as well, because there are a host of different programs. There's weatherization programs, there's rooftop solar programs, and being able to understand and navigate the many different application processes, many different programs that are out there, especially for folks who may not be as familiar with the state's process or interacting with the state agency, may not be aware of these opportunities that are available to them. So I know programs like what Valley Can does in the San Joaquin Valley, what Liberty Hill does with the Empower program in the South Coast area, the Quality Management District area. Certainly being able to connect those folks should be a priority, because it really, again, is connecting the state's climate policies and climate programs to the day-to-day individual lives of these folks. So when people wonder, well, what is government doing for me? What's California's climate leadership doing for me? This is directly where the rubber meets the road, not to use a pun, but really to make sure that people are benefiting directly from these programs. We can have climate benefits, which are great, and certainly I would push for. We could have air quality benefits, which does have a direct health or impact on people's health. But when you have a car that you got for this program, or a transit option that you got for this program, when you have potential weatherization improvements, that's really where it's making an impact on people's lives. Okay, well, we are well over time, but I do appreciate everybody participating today. I also want to thank everybody for their very good behavior and cooperation. Getting 96 participants to all have their microphones muted for the most part is quite something quite remarkable. So again, thank you very much for your time and participation today. Thank you to Fresno Economic Opportunities Commission and Amelia Reyes, as well as Greg Pierce and the entire UCLA Luskin team. And thank you very much for your questions, and look forward to continuing our work to promote clean transportation in California. Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.